A rare defeat for the National Rifle Association in Texas. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, the state legislature has just adjourned and won't be back for a couple of years. And they left on the governor's desk in Texas a $250 million spending bill, $1 million of which included funding for a public safety campaign on gun storage. And this idea came into being, or at least came to the fore, after the Santa Fe high school shooting, because police then said that the 17-year-old suspect had taken his father's weapons from their home. Bill, the NRA vigorously campaigned against this idea of spending $1 million to encourage people to store their guns safely. I guess the initial question comes to mind is, I understand you want to defend gun rights, but why would the National Rifle Association oppose a public safety campaign designed to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them?
I don't know the answer to that. I can't imagine why. I mean, I think by this point, my bona fides as far as gun ownership are concerned, at least in terms of my general overall attitude, are fairly clear. I don't know. I would like to know what the NRA's position on it was. I suspect it's more complicated than what you've just laid out. The one thing that impressed me the most about the time I was working with the NRA, briefly for about a year, was how much time and effort they spent on precisely this issue, on safety issues. So I suspect that the reason that they fought against it was that it was going to be propagandized in such a way or administered in such a way that it was objectionable. That's the only thing I can think of. I can't imagine anybody making a reasonable argument in favor of being safe with your weapons at home, other than perhaps to say that really, again, I'm not sure entirely it's the government's business to tell us that, but this doesn't seem like the kind of thing that I would want to go to war for. I don't see any downside to this at all, other than the fact that you're spending public money on something that the government doesn't really need to do.
Well, this is the argument allegedly from the National Rifle Association. The NRA lobbied against this kind of a bill or this kind of a campaign at public expense, arguing that gun rights groups and gun manufacturers already have similar campaigns, and those are widely distributed in gun stores and at shooting ranges. Right. And that this kind of campaign could easily be corrupted by anti-gun rhetoric.
Yeah. That's a good argument. Now I know why they fought it. I mean, the optics on it are poor because of the way it was presented, and that's undoubtedly the way it's being presented to the country. What on earth could those NRA Neanderthal savages have against the very idea of at least showing people how to keep guns safe? But now that you've explained their position, it's the position that I suspected they had, or would have had, and that is that there is more to the story than just here's how you lock up a gun. One of the things that we have seen throughout the entire progressive catastrophe that's enveloped this country in the last 50 years has been the weaponization of government power in virtually any way imaginable in support of progressive policies. And the risk, I suppose, of pamphleteering on the part of enemies of Second Amendment rights posed what I'm sure the NRA thought was a threat. But the argument, as posited by the left, is a compelling one, and it is undoubtedly. Look, the NRA, and especially the NRA lawyers, have read this bill. I haven't read the bill. I haven't even heard of the bill before this. But be willing to bet you that if they fought as hard as they did, then they fought hard because there are elements in that bill that lead not only to propaganda or, at the very least, electioneering of some kind, but also that there might be elements in this that begin that slippery slope. And the problem with the slippery slope is not the last step. That's the part before you fall into the river where the crocodiles are. The danger of the slippery slope is the first step, which looks pretty much exactly like the step you just finished. That's the whole thing. So, again, not having read the bill, I suspect there's a good reason why they went to bat for it. And I suspect the reason that they were defeated in Texas is because it's a quality of the left to try and find a way to make anything as pernicious as they want to be as palpable as possible to the American people. Anything that they want, no matter how destructive it may be, can be presented in such a way that it would seem at first glance that no reasonable person could disagree with it. And that's precisely what my reaction was when I heard how you presented the story just now.
In general, Bill, when we look at campaigns like this, funded at public expense, done at the behest of the government, what is the conservative position on the idea that your federal or even state government should be mounting essentially publicity campaigns to tell you how to live your life better or more safely?
They should have no business doing that at all. But they do. The kind of thing I'm talking about that I suspect that again, I have to keep saying suspect and so on. I certainly know what my principles are. I just don't know what the details in that bill are. But you could also, and not only could also, you also had many, many people making the argument a generation or two or three ago, I don't even remember now, where they were saying that sex education for kids is a societal good. It keeps them out of unwanted pregnancies and away from venereal disease. And all basically it was sold as, we're just going to explain to boys who are 16 years old or older or whatever, that this is a condom and this will stop you from getting syphilis. And that has morphed through the slippery slope process into, in California, legislation that requires that, I mean, I forget what the numbers are, Scott, but it's incredibly young. It's something like second graders are presented with the entire spectrum of human sexuality, including homosexuality, transsexuality, how all of this stuff is laid on kids. And when conservatives respond to this as an outrage, because it is an outrage, the left says you're homophobic. It's like, no. I don't want my second grader getting a pamphlet about how to perform homosexual sex in the same way that I don't want my second grader to get a pamphlet on how to perform heterosexual sex. My second grader has no business dealing with any of this stuff. He will get to that, or she will get to that at the appropriate age with our guidance, and it's none of your damn business to start proselytizing and to start putting your ideas into the heads of our kids. And I suspect more and more as we get deeper into this topic that this is precisely what the NRA saw on the table. But again, it's very difficult to get behind something that's, look, Scott, if the left decided that they were going to put together a policy to burn every flag in America and to put every single conservative in a camp, it would be labeled the American Freedom and Liberty Act. I swear to God, that would be the name of it. No, it would be. And it would be presented in such a way as to say, don't we owe our forefathers the same protection of our society that's protected us for 250 years? These dangerous people don't we have our? You could make it's an expression I like very much, and it was like, I heard it during the Rodney King trial, and that was that a good lawyer can make you believe that an elephant can dangle over a cliff with his tail tied to a daisy, and it's true. So this, I suspect, is what caused this action on the part of the NRA. And
now, this was pushed through, by the way, Bill, by Republicans. Obviously, it's the Texas state legislature, so this is not exactly like San Francisco or San Diego or Sacramento, right, or wherever you people hold your state government. So it was pushed through by Republicans. One wonders whether this is not, in fact, genius on the part of people who advance this idea, because wouldn't you say that it could possibly be more effective to run a publicity campaign than it could be to pass a law?
Well, first of all, if there was any kind of because we're not talking about a law, right? We're not talking about any changes to the laws of gun ownership, safety, keep the rules of having a gun. There's no legal coercion involved in this bill, presumably. This is an awareness campaign. That's how
Yes.
it's being sold. Okay, so automatically, most of my problems with it are off the table. But this is the perniciousness of our opponents. And I suspect the reason that it passed was because who wants to come out standing out against a bill that says, look, we're just trying to tell people how to handle their guns more safely so there are fewer accidents. Who could have a problem with that?
Yeah,
But
in the state
for
where
the
the
but
Santa Fe shootings happened and the church shooting as well.
well, those shootings happen in a lot of states, Scott. They happen in California as well, and California and Texas couldn't be more different in terms of philosophy. The presence of insane people, murder, suicides, people who are extremely disturbed, who decide that they want to commit suicide by cop and have their faces on every television in the entire planet. Those people exist not just in every state in the union, but in every country in the world, and those are not unique to Texas, California, or any other place. Texas, as a government, has a much more solid sense. Look, Texas as a government, you can sum up the reason why Texas has a better government than California by your opening sentence, which is the legislature has finished and has gone away for a couple of years. That's an inconceivable thing to somebody who lives in California. I mean, I'd have a hard time believing somebody who said the legislature has taken a brief bathroom break and they'll be back in a couple of minutes. I kind of think, no, they're making some kind of deal back there and they're writing some kind of laws. So
Wouldn't it be better for the NRA to embrace this and say, look, if you're going to do training or a public campaign rather about gun safety, why don't you let us help you craft that?
now we're down to the optics of it. And we are also down to the great vulnerability that conservatives have. And it's a two-part vulnerability, I think. One of them is that we simply can't believe that some people could be as rotten as they are. It's just inconceivable to us that people could cheat openly the way that our opponents seem to, with voter fraud and dead people voting. It's hard for us to imagine, really, that this is actually that they're capable of that. But I think a bigger issue is that the left has what Evan Sayet referred to as rhetorical intelligence as opposed to practical intelligence. They're very, very, very good at talking. And I have a fair amount of rhetorical intelligence. I'm just, as we've said before, I'm a daywalker. I'm a vampire that kills other vampires because I used to be one. I know how they think, and I know how especially know how they work. And so we're down now to the issue of, yes, that's precisely what the NRA should have done. The NRA, I suspect, if it were me looking back on it, I would have led the way to have an NRA-sponsored program of some kind that you could have a relatively high level of confidence in would not be actually psychologically subverting people's Second Amendment rights, which is what is almost certain to happen out of a legislature, even of a place where Texas. Look, Beto O'Rourke got pretty close to Ted Cruz, and that is a wake-up call for everybody, especially people who live in Texas, who now have California and Oregon neighbors who have fled the disaster they left behind and trying to bring a new disaster to Texas.
And this should go without saying, and I think you've indicated it earlier, Bill, but I do want to emphasize that nobody in the United States of America does more to promote safe use and caring for and treatment of guns than does the National Rifle Association.
This is the point I was making earlier. When we said that there was a bill in place and that this bill had passed, I said I find it odd that the NRA would be opposed to it, since so much of what they do is about gun safety. And then because I had not heard of this bill, and then as we started discussing it further, it became clearer to me what some possible objections would be. But I think the one thing that would surprise progressives more than anything, I mean, really, really shock them, would be for them to visit a gun range. I think progressives would be astonished, just slack-jaw gobsmacked, to realize the levels of safety and professionalism and seriousness that American citizens who own weapons display with those weapons. I think they'd be really, really, really shocked to go on a gun range and see that people have to stand behind a yellow line with the weapons pointed downrange, the breeches open, and 4 or 5 feet back before the range is declared safe to go out and change the targets. Just little things like that. I think they'd be stunned. I'm quite sure they think that we just drive down the hill there. Yeah. And it's how they work. They build a cartoon image of people, and then they get frothed up about this cartoon image, which is a loathsome and disgusting image. I agree. It just doesn't happen to exist. That's the only problem with it. It's just not real. That's the problem. And so they invent these fantasy monsters that allow them to put their own personal virtue signaling ahead of anything else, because they don't tend to be very virtuous people as a general rule. And so they come up with a straw man, with some kind of a dummy opponent who they are smarter than and better than. And this is the main point about the madness of the age that we live in right now. And when no evidence can be found for the traits of their imagined enemy, because it doesn't exist, because it's imaginary, when no evidence of racism can be found in Tea Party events, they are convinced that the enemy is racist, that Tea Party people must be racist. So a person of low intelligence of any kind, practically a turnip, could make a decision and say, look, you claim that this group is racist. We're looking at all these groups. We don't see any sign of racism. We may find one sign in 10,000 rallies attended by millions of people. That statistically is a zero. That's a zero. But that's not how they think. They can't make that fundamental distinction. They are convinced that, okay, the reason that there's no racist signs at Tea Party rallies is not because they're not racist, but because they're all secretly racist. And so then they go out and manufacture racist signs to provide the evidence for the belief that they had in the first place, for which there was no evidence to believe in the first place. And Scott, when they do this, when they start manufacturing evidence, all of these, Jesse Smollett, for example, perfect example, right? Perfect example. I'm a victim of being black, and it's a horrible thing being a young black celebrity. It's almost unbearable, and now I'm going to go hire 2 people to rough me up a little bit, so that I can claim that I was beaten up by Donald Trump supporters. That's not just evidence that Donald Trump supporters are not racist. It is evidence of the fact that they're not. It is, if you have to manufacture evidence for your opponent, then your opponent is not only correct, but you're admitting it by simply doing that.
Well, just to clarify the expense involved here, the $1 million that is budgeted for this campaign, if the governor approves it, that comes out to about 77 cents per licensed handgun holder in Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for tuning
By
in.
A fair number of 22 rounds with 77 cents. I mean, it's not a trivial thing.
That's right. Thank you for tuning in to Bill Whittle Now. It's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com. Who do a lot more than just contribute financially to this enterprise. They, in many ways, generate some of the best content we produce at that member-exclusive site. We invite you to get a look at it by joining them by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking that Become a Member link. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making this possible.